Tag team wrestling has always been one of the more exciting parts of the industry when done well, as it can offer a whole different flavor to that which you'd find in singles action. And WWE has been no stranger to having some great duos capable of providing this flavor over the years. But just who are the best tag team for each year of the 21st century? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at right now, starting with the best tag team of 2000, Edge and Christian. Now, there were three teams you could have gone for as being the best WWF tag team of 2000, Edge and Christian, the Hardy Boys, or the Dudley Boys. Hell, this was the year all three broke out of the box with their fantastic triangle ladder match at WrestleMania 2000 and their even better TLC 1 bout at SummerSlam that same year. But if we had to pick one duo which stood out above the others, it would be the one made up of the two Canadians. Why is this? Well, both those matches were won by Edge and Christian for one, so really, that should be enough to put them over the edge. But it wasn't just this which made the Toronto Boys great in 2000. No, it was also their excellent goofball heel characters, the same characters who brought us gimmicks such as their 5-second pose. Come 2001, however, they'd be usurped for the position of best tag team in WWF by the Dudley Boys. Yes, it's another year where any one of the three TLC teams could have been a viable option to pick. But we chose to go with the Dudleys, as after TLC 2 broke even more ground at WrestleMania 17, they'd go on to have the best year after that. And the way they did this was by being the most dominant in-ring duo of the Invasion angle. Seriously, it didn't matter who came up against them here, whether it be a WWF team, a WCW one, or even a fellow ECW duo, Bubba Ray and Devon stepped up to all comers and almost always stood tall by the time the evening was over. But what of 2002? Well, that was the year we'd move away from the TLC trio for a while, as the era of the SmackDown 6 began, and the best tag team in WWE were none other than Los Guerreros. Okay, if you weren't watching SmackDown back then, the show pretty much revolved around 6 stars in Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit, Edge, Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, and Chavo Guerrero, with each of these men being great in both singles and tag team action week in and week out on the Blue brand. But of the duos that were made up out of these 6, none were better than Los Guerreros. But why wouldn't they be, as being shoot uncle and nephew, Eddie and Chavo Guerrero had an undeniable chemistry, one which helped them to become WWE Tag Team Champions by the time the year was over. And that success would carry on over in 2003 as well, as it happened, because when it came to that year, Los Guerreros would once again be the best tag team in WWE. That's right, as the era of the SmackDown 6 continued to thrive, Los Guerreros continued to dominate tag team wrestling on Thursday nights by working like a well-oiled unit each and every week. Come on now, everyone who came up against them here would ultimately end up falling prey to their mantra of lie, cheat, and steal. But for as much greatness as Eddie and Chavo made during 2003 as a team, it would also mark the end of their partnership. And the reason for that is because it was later on in the year that Chavo turned on his uncle. Even if this is the case, however, they were still good enough while they were together to be considered the best of the bunch. Obviously though, come 2004, the landscape would be very different, and the best team of that year would instead be the world's greatest tag team. Now, it might seem redundant to say that a team called the world's greatest tag team was the best tag team in WWE in 2004. After all, it's in their name to be the best. But while for some this would have been nothing more than a gimmick, for Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas, it was very much the truth. And that was why they were able to spend this 12-month period making such short work of opponents like the APA, the Basham Brothers, and Rikishi and Scotty 2 Hotty. No, they were never the flashiest team, but that wasn't what they were going for. Rather, what the world's greatest tag team were all about was precision technical wrestling and bell-to-bell mastery. That said, this precision wouldn't be enough to see them do a repeat in 2005, as that year the mantle of best WWE tag team would have moved on to M&M instead. Okay, if the world's greatest tag team were all about mat work, then M&M were the exact opposite in that they excelled while they were in the air. And this high-flying style made them a quick hit with fans of the SmackDown brand back in 2005, even if the pairing of Johnny Nitro and Joey Mercury were supposed to be heels. But then it was hard not to like these guys, or their manager Melina for that matter. No, it was much easier to just sit back and appreciate what they were doing. Hell, they certainly gave people enough reason to do so, as, almost immediately after arriving on the Blue brand, they'd win the WWE Tag Team titles, with them from there using their brash arrogance to get the upper hand during defenses against the likes of the Legion of Doom and Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. And that high-flying level of skill would continue on in spirit as 2006 came around too, and the best tag team of WWE became Paul London and Brian Kendrick instead. Yes, 2006 was a time period characterized by a lot of randomly thrown together teams, with this meaning the division wasn't at its strongest. But on SmackDown at least, it did have an ace in the hole in Paul London and Brian Kendrick. What made them so good here? Well, they stood out as they weren't your typical WWE tag team. Rather, with them being on the smaller side and being a lot more high-flying, they were far more similar to what you'd find in something like a Ring of Honor. Sure, that could have held them back, but neither London nor Kendrick would allow this to happen. And so it was that in the summer of this year, they'd go on to win the WWE Tag Team titles from M&M, and from there hold on to the gold for a full 333 days. Needless to say then, this was a huge achievement for an indie duo like they were, and early proof that ROH stars would be able to find some success in WWE. Come 2007 though, the mantle of the best tag team in WWE would have very much moved back over to a more long-running WWE team, as this was the year the Hardys finally climbed to the top of the pile. Sure, we could have gone with the duo of Matt and Jeff Hardy in either 2000 or 2001, but during both those years, it felt like they were pipped to the post by either Edge and Christian or the Dudley Boys. Come 2007, however, neither of those pairings were an issue for the brothers from North Carolina anymore, and that meant they were able to rise to the forefront completely without being compared to anyone else. Of course, it's not like the Hardys didn't earn this spot this year though. No, this was far from an example of them coasting on their legend status. Rather, 2007 would see the brothers win the World Tag Team titles at WrestleMania, and from there, spend the next several months being the workhorses of the division during bouts against the likes of M&M, the world's greatest tag team, and Cade and Murdoch. But what if we move on to 2008 next? Who would be the best tag team in WWE we'd find there? Well, it would be a whole new duo as it happened, one which represented a fresh generation of talent in The Miz and John Morrison. Yes, John Morrison had been around for a few years already by this point, and had even been a part of WWE's Best Tag Team of 2005 alongside Joey Mercury. But 2008 represented an arguably even better remembered pairing, the one between him and Mike Mizanin. What made this one so special? Well, both men were able to come across like the biggest douchebag heels in their entire division, and in doing so, made everyone desperate to see them be beaten. But that wasn't to say they were just whipping boys for the likes of D-Generation X or anything like that. No, by the time 2008 was over, Miz and Morrison would have proven themselves to be legitimate contenders by becoming World Tag Team Champions, and that momentum would only continue in 2009 for them too. With that said, this time there would be another team who overtook them as the best in WWE, another pair who started out as singles acts and eventually came together as one, none other than Jericho. That's right, while there have been a lot of odd couple teams in WWE's history, few have been quite as odd on the face of things as the one made up of Chris Jericho and The Big Show. After all, aside from both being former WCW alumni, it wasn't like the two had a lot in common. They certainly had wildly different in-ring styles, but in the end, this disparity between the pair ended up working out for them, as it would be in 2009 that upon coming together, they'd quickly become unified tag team champions. Obviously then, this was a pretty big achievement at the time, as WWE had never seen unified tag team championships since the brand split came into effect in 2002. And once they were separated again, it would be a few years before such a thing was ever seen again. All of this is to say then that there was no better team going in 2009 than Jericho. But even this wouldn't make them the best of 2010, as that year, the best WWE tag team would have to be the Hart Dynasty. Now, the Hart Dynasty isn't a team which gets talked about too much today, and that's partially because neither of the male members of the group are still active in WWE in the 2020s. Now, when it comes to Tyson Kidd, he had to retire years ago on account of a pretty serious neck injury, and when it comes to Davey Boy Smith Jr., well, he currently works for All Japan Pro Wrestling. Back in 2010, though, both were part of the WWE roster, working alongside Natalya Neidhart on the Raw brand. And it was there they were able to excel as the new decade began, because during this 12-month calendar period, they'd fully established themselves as a duo to watch when they beat Show Miz to win the unified tag team titles in the spring. What did they do once they had got the gold? Well, they'd defend this against all comers, with the most notable of their opponents here being a young rookie brother duo known as the Usos. Sadly though, the Hart Dynasty's run on top would not prove to be a long one, and this meant that when 2011 came around, there was once more a new top team in town, one which went by the name of the Awesome Truth. Now, 2011 was a strange year for the WWE Tag Team division because, as was the case with some years during the 2000s, the majority of the duo's roster was made up of seemingly random pairings, but there was one team which were able to stand out even if they were a bit of a ramshackle pairing themselves. the one named Awesome Truth. Not that they had nothing in common though. No, in the autumn of 2011, The Miz and R-Truth were both very much unified in their collective frustration over the way they were being treated by the company. After all, in The Miz's case, he'd been a WWE champion who main evented WrestleMania only a few months earlier, and in the case of R-Truth, he was never taken as seriously as he should have been. So it all made sense that they joined forces and decided to ruin the main event of the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view in October by hijacking the show as it came to an end. What came after that? Well, a true high point for the pair, as they'd take on The Rock and John Cena at Survivor Series just 1 month later. But come 2012, the era of the Awesome Truth would be ending, and we'd instead be moving over to the era of Team Hell No. Now, we mentioned earlier on how much of an odd pairing Jericho was, but Team Hell No was on a different level altogether, as they were made up of Daniel Bryan and Kane. Still, despite these two having absolutely nothing in common on the surface of things, they were able to get hugely over in 2012, largely on account of their anger management skills. Of course, that's not to say they weren't killing it in the ring as well, though. No, it was during this year that the pair would become WWE Tag Team Champions, with all this just continuing to build fan support for the American Dragon en route to the climax of the Yes Movement a couple of years later. But this path toward him being a single superstar would mean Team Hell No sadly wouldn't be the best tag team of 2012. No, that honor would instead go to the Rhodes Brothers. Now, we all know how big of a deal Cody Rhodes is in 2025, and we also know how much his brother Dustin is still killing it in the ring despite his age. But what you might have forgotten is that back in 2013, they were at their strongest when they were together as a team. And if you need any evidence of this being the case, you only have to look at the absolutely excellent feud they had with The Shield here, one which ended with them toppling the Hounds of Justice in order to get the American Nightmare his job back after the Authority had fired him. Still not convinced? How about the subsequent tag team run the Rhodes Brothers went on, the one which saw them defend against opponents such as the Usos, the Real Americans, and the New Age Outlaws? Honestly, were it not for the Yes Movement, the saga of Cody and Dustin might have been in contention for the best WWE storyline of that year, just as it could be said for the saga of the best WWE tag team of 2014, The Miz and Damien Mizdow. Yes, this was one which turned into one of the most memorable angles of the era. And the reason it did so was mostly because Damien Mizdow was so good in his role. What was that role? Well, throughout that year, he would act as The Miz's personal stunt double, a spot which usually meant mimicking every move Mizanin made while standing at ringside during his matches. Not that Mizdow didn't get in the ring himself too, though. No, he and Miz would team up together many times throughout 2014, and this eventually led to them winning the gold at Survivor Series when they defeated the Rhodes Brothers, Los Matadores, and the Usos for the honor. Sure, by 2015, they had gone their separate ways when Mizdow decided he'd had enough of The Miz, but in 2014, they were on top of the world in WWE. Of course, that begs the question of who was the best tag team of 2015 then? Well, that would be our next subject, The New Day? Come on now, it was inevitable we were going to get to The New Day eventually. As for the last decade or so, they really have been one of the key tag teams in WWE. Really, it's between them and the Usos if you want to talk about the collective which had the most impact. But while there's an argument to be made about which one is the best today, back in 2015 it was all about the New Day, as this was the year where their act finally started to click with fans after a rocky beginning. That's right, it was here that they morphed into their final forms, 3 geek culture nerds in Xavier Woods, Kofi Kingston, and Big E, who also just happened to be amongst the best workers their division had to offer, and that can be evidenced throughout their many great matches against the likes of Tyson Kidd and Cesaro, the Primetime Players, and the Lucha Dragons. So good would they be, they'd end up spending the majority of the year as WWE Tag Team Champions after beating Kidd and Cesaro for the gold at Extreme Rules in April. Hell, this was a set of titles they'd still be holding on to as 2016 came around as it happened, and they were still the top tag team in all of WWE. Seriously, if 2015 was about the rise of the New Day to the level of being one of the more over babyface acts in WWE at the time, then 2016 was about them fully coordinating themselves in the spot. After all, by this point, they'd be breaking Demolition's previously held record for longest tag team title reign in WWE history by holding on to their gold for a full 483 days. And as they were doing that, they were getting even more over with audiences every week as 3 lovable babyface nerds. Then there was the continued string of great matches they were having against teams such as Enzo and Cass, the Good Brothers, and the Vaudevillains. Really, back during the mid-2010s, it felt like the trio made up of Big E, Xavier Woods, and Kofi Kingston was on top of the world. But 2017 would see a slight change in things, as 2017 would see their chief rivals take up the mantle of best tag team in WWE. Who are we talking about here? Why, the Usos, of course. Yes, though they had been on the WWE roster for a few years by then, 2017 was the year that the Usos first truly broke out of the pack and became the top duo in their division. And the way they did this was by dropping the colorful look they had before, complete with face paint and traditional Samoan war dances, and instead going for something a little bit grittier. What was this new look? Well, it was a more street-smart one which saw Jimmy and Jay introduce us to the Uso Penitentiary. And that was enough to give them the final boost they needed. Just as well they did then, because it was in 2017 that the Usos were tasked with having some of the best matches in their division, a task which they delivered on as they continued their by then epic feud with the New Day. And all that led to them closing out the year with tag team gold around their waists once more. But even that run carrying on into 2018 wouldn't be enough to see them end up being the best WWE tag team of this year too. And this title wouldn't be taken up by the New Day either as it happened. Rather, it would be taken by a somewhat unlikely duo in The Bar. Now we say this one is a somewhat unlikely duo as the team made up of Sheamus and Cesaro actually started life as a rivalry when both men were involved in a lengthy best-of-7 series back in 2016. But once that series came to an end with a draw and both men realized they were better off pooling the resources, a powerhouse team was formed. That said, it wouldn't be until 2018 that they'd really reach the top of the pile, as this was the point they truly became the standard bearers of Raw's tag team division for a while there. How would they do this? Well, by eschewing flashy gimmicks in exchange for physical brutality. That and working like a well-oiled machine at all times as they took on the likes of the Hardy Boys and the Shield. Sure, they may have lost to a 10-year-old at WrestleMania, but that only showed how much they were willing to play ball with their bosses and only further rooted them deeply within the company as trusted hands who could be counted on with just about anything. Come 2019, however, the tides would have turned once more as the Bar were unable to make it a double. No, this year they'd be usurped by a familiar face in the New Day. Now, it might seem like a lot to have the New Day be labeled as the best tag team in WWE for the third time in 6 years, but when you look at their output during this period, it's hard not to go with that. Seriously, 2019 was the year the trio went to another level again when they all stuck by each other as Kofi Kingston rose all the way to the top of the mountain. Yes, were it not for Big E and Xavier Woods helping their partner out, we might never have gotten Kofi Kingston winning the WWE title from Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 35, and that's a testament to just how strong they were as a unit. But it wasn't just singles success the New Day were finding in 2019. No, they were also continuing to dominate the tag team scene by winning the SmackDown Tag Team Championships again, all while they were having added bangers against the likes of the Usos and the Revival. Would this success carry on into 2020? Well, yes, but not enough to see them avoid being topped in the role of best WWE tag team by our next subjects, the Street Profits. Now, 2020 was a tough year for us all, so we needed to find good things wherever we could get them. And in WWE, one of the good things they were able to give us here was the Street Profits rise to the top as Raw and then later SmackDown Tag Team Champions. Honestly, at this point, it looked like Montez Ford and Angelo Dawkins might just be the future of WWE. After all, they were putting out excellent performances each and every week during a time when it was never harder to do so. Really then, they deserve all the praise in the world for being able to shoulder their division during a very difficult 12-month period, and for continuing to be a star attraction of it well into 2021 too. That said, the Street Profits wouldn't be the star attraction of the WWE Tag Team division in 2021, as that honor would instead go to our next subject, RK Bro. Yes, for as much as the first half of 2021 was very much like 2020 in that it was a case where wrestling shows were marred by a lack of atmosphere, some teams were able to break through. And one of the teams who broke out the most here was the unlikely duo of Randy Orton and Matt Riddle. Sure, it was only meant to be a short-term thing at first, but after fans started taking to the pair, the whole thing was extended, as come the summer of 2021, RK Bro would be the Raw Tag Team Champions. Where would they go after that? Well, they'd defend those belts against anyone who wanted a shot. We're talking about teams such as Alpha Academy, the Street Profits, and the Usos here. Yes, here was evidence that thrown together acts can work sometimes, as this one was easily one of the biggest success stories of 2021 WWE. But what about 2022? Well, that year the pendulum would have swung back to a more established team, as that year it was all about the Usos once more. Of course, this should be an obvious one though, as 2022 was the year where the Usos fully reached their final form. After all, with them now both being members of the Bloodline, they were able to use the help of both their tribal chief Roman Reigns and their wise man Paul Heyman to snag not only the Raw Tag Team Championships, but the SmackDown Tag Team Championships too. That's right, it was here that Jimmy and Jay unified the gold once more, in the process ensuring they'd be the best tag team in WWE for that 12-month period. But it wasn't just the title success which made the Usos stand out here. No, aside from their predictably great matches, there was also all of the Bloodline segments they were a part of, many of which saw them work alongside the secret ace of that group, Sami Zayn. Honestly, this was the point where the Sons of Rikishi became full-blown legends of the company. But even then, they wouldn't be able to be the best WWE Tag Team of 2023 as well. No, that year, it ended up being all about the Judgment Day. And when we say the Judgment Day, we should clarify that we're talking about one specific team within this stable, Damian Priest and Finn Balor. Yes, while various different combinations of the heel group would partner up at various points throughout 2023, it was the Archer of Infamy and the Prince who had the most success together. What did this success add up to on screen? Well, a run as undisputed tag team champions for one, with this allowing both men to travel between Raw and SmackDown freely for as long as they held the gold around their waists. Honestly, if there were any year during the height of the Bloodline saga where it felt like that group might have a challenger when it came to the position of top stable in WWE, then this was it, because this was the year the Judgment Day felt stronger than ever. And a large part of the reason for that was because Finn and Damian remained such a consistent presence on both brands as fighting champions, wrestlers who were ready to take on all comers despite being heels. Would this make them the best tag team of 2024 too? Surprisingly not. No, that year we'd get a blast from the past in this spot when we got the surprise reunion of Awesome Truth. That's right, over a decade after they first teamed up, 2024 would be the year that The Miz and R-Truth decided to join forces once more. Why were they doing this? Well, it was a bit of nostalgia, and that nostalgia paid off for them, as it would be at WrestleMania 40 that they'd come out on top during a ladder match to win the Raw Tag Team titles. No, it wouldn't be a lengthy reign which followed, but it reminded WWE fans why they'd fallen in love with the Awesome Truth so many years back, all while giving each man a boost during what is now surely the latter days of their in-ring career. Yes, if this was the last hurrah for both The Miz and R-Truth when it comes to holding gold, it was a nice way to go out, as it allowed them to reach the top of their division one more time. It's just a shame this run wouldn't be able to last in 2025. But then at least 2025 gave us the resurgence of our entry for best WWE tag team of that year, The New Day. What makes The New Day's 2025 different to all the other years in which they were the best tag team in WWE? Well, this time, they were playing the heels. Yes, after a decade of being beloved by fans, it was in the middle of the decade that The New Day decided to flip back to the side of villainy. How did they do this? Well, after Big E suffered a neck injury back in 2022, one which to this day has kept him out of the ring, it would be in 2025 that Xavier Woods and Kofi Kingston formally decided to part ways with their brother and go out on their own. And this certainly paid off for them, as it would be in 2025 that they'd also regain the Raw Tag Team titles that they still held up until very recently. So really, the heel turn has managed to breathe fresh life into their act, and that's why they've earned their spot as one of WWE's best tag teams of the 21st century, just as everyone else we've looked at today has done too.